The nurse smiled as she handed over the paperwork, telling Eleanor she was lucky to be going home so soon. Eleanor smiled back, relieved. But as the automatic doors of the hospital slid shut behind her, sealing her fate, she didn't realize that the paper in her hand wasn't a ticket to freedom. It was a warrant for a nightmare that would begin exactly 4 hours later. Eleanor Miller, a 78-year-old retired history teacher, sat in the wheelchair in the hospital lobby, clutching her purse as if it contained the nuclear codes. In reality, it contained something far more volatile: her discharge papers and a prescription for painkillers that cost more than her monthly grocery budget. She had fallen in her kitchen 3 days ago. A simple slip, a wet tile, a worn-out slipper, and crack. A hip fracture. The surgery had gone perfectly, according to the surgeon, a man who looked like he hadn't slept since the Clinton administration. "You are stable, Mrs. Miller," the discharge planner had said that morning, tapping furiously on a tablet without making eye contact. "Insurance follows strict guidelines. Your vitals are good. You can recover at home." Eleanor had nodded eagerly. The hospital smelled of antiseptic and death. The food tasted like wet cardboard, and the woman in the next bed screamed at invisible cats all night. Eleanor wanted her own bed. She wanted her silence. "Is there someone at home to help you?" the planner had asked, finally looking up. This was the moment. The crossroads. Eleanor thought of her son David. He lived 3 states away, drowning in a corporate job and raising 2 teenagers who probably thought a landline was an ancient artifact. If she said no, they would send her to a skilled nursing facility. A nursing home. The place where old people went to wait for the end. The place that would take her house to pay the bills. "Yes," Eleanor lied. Her voice didn't even tremble. "My neighbor, she checks on me, and my son is coming for the weekend." It was a lie born of pride and fear, a lie that many seniors tell. But what Eleanor didn't know was that the hospital staff knew she might be lying, and they didn't care. They needed the bed. It was Friday afternoon, and the weekend rush of ER admissions was beginning. She was being cleared out like inventory. The medical transport van arrived 20 minutes late. The driver, a burly man named Gus, who was chewing gum with aggressive enthusiasm, didn't offer to help her into the house. He simply unloaded the wheelchair, wheeled her to the front door, and waited for her to unlock it. "You good, lady?" Gus asked, checking his watch. "I'm fine," Eleanor said, leaning heavily on her walker. The pain in her hip was a dull throb, kept at bay by the dose of morphine they had given her just before discharge. "Thank you." She watched the van drive away. The street was quiet. It was 4:30 p.m. on a Friday in late October 2019. The sun was dipping low, casting long, stretching shadows across her lawn in Springfield, Massachusetts. The grass needed cutting. Eleanor turned the key and stepped inside. The air in the house was stale. It smelled of old books and lavender, the scent of her life. She took a step, and the walker caught on the edge of the rug. A sharp bolt of lightning shot up her leg, exploding in her hip. She gasped, freezing in place. The hospital morphine was wearing off. She shuffled to her favorite armchair in the living room and collapsed into it. She was home. She was safe. Or so she thought. As she sat there, catching her breath, her eyes landed on the kitchen counter. There, sitting in a mocking row, were her pill bottles. But the new pain medication, the one she desperately needed for the coming night, was still in the pharmacy bag, stapled shut, sitting on the dining table. The dining table was 12 feet away. It might as well have been on the moon. Eleanor closed her eyes. "I'll just rest for a moment," she told herself. "Then I'll get the pills." She woke up in darkness. The room was pitch black. Her hip was no longer throbbing. It was screaming. It felt like a hot iron was being pressed against the bone. She tried to shift her weight, and a cry of agony escaped her lips, sounding thin and pathetic in the empty house. She reached for the lamp next to her chair. Click. Nothing. The bulb had burned out a week ago, and she had forgotten to change it before the fall. Panic, cold and sharp, began to rise in her chest. She needed the pills. She needed water. She needed to use the bathroom. This is the reality of the Friday discharge. If you go home on a Friday, there is no one to call until Monday. The doctor's office is closed. The home health agency hasn't processed your file yet. You're in the black hole of the weekend. Eleanor gripped the arms of the chair. "Come on, Ellie," she whispered to herself. "You raised a child alone. You taught high school history to delinquents for 30 years. You can walk 12 feet. She pushed herself up. The pain was blinding. It made her vision swim. She grabbed the walker. Step, agony. Step, nausea. She made it to the dining table. Her hands were shaking so badly she could barely rip open the pharmacy bag. She clawed at the stapled paper. Finally, the bottle fell out. It was a child-proof cap. There is a cruel irony in giving child-proof bottles to seniors with arthritis. Eleanor pressed down and turned. Her hands, weak from surgery and shaking from pain, slipped. The bottle skittered across the polished table and rolled off the edge, landing on the floor with a cheerful plastic rattle. Eleanor stared at the bottle on the floor. It was right there, but to get it, she would have to bend down. If she bent down, she might not get up. Or worse, she might fall again. Tears pricked her eyes. Not tears of pain, but of humiliation. She was a woman of dignity. She quoted Churchill. She understood the geopolitical complexities of the Cold War, and now she was defeated by gravity and a piece of plastic. She decided to leave the pills. She would just get water. She was parched. Her mouth felt like sandpaper. She shuffled to the sink. She reached for a glass from the drying rack. Her depth perception, skewed by the exhaustion, failed her. Her hand knocked the glass. It shattered in the sink. "Leave it. Just drink from the tap." She cupped her hand under the faucet. The water was lukewarm, but it tasted like nectar. She drank greedily. Then the phone rang. It was the landline sitting on the small table in the hallway. Who calls at 9 p.m. on a Friday? David. Hope surged through her. If it was David, she could tell him. She could drop the facade. She could say, "I'm scared, come help me." She turned the walker too fast. The rubber foot of the walker hit a wet spot on the floor. Water she had splashed while drinking. The walker slid. Eleanor lost her balance. She flailed, her hand grasping for the counter, the refrigerator handle, anything. She didn't fall. By some miracle of adrenaline, she caught herself on the doorframe. She hung there, gasping, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. The phone continued to ring. 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 She couldn't reach it. She was frozen in a contorted position, afraid to move a single muscle lest her hip give way. The ringing stopped. The silence that followed was heavier than before. Eleanor managed to pull herself upright. She abandoned the hallway. She shuffled back to the armchair. The journey back seemed twice as long. When she finally sat down, she was weeping openly. She sat in the dark, in pain, thirsty, and alone. But the night had more to teach her. As the moonlight began to filter through the window, illuminating the stack of mail she had brought in from the hospital, she saw the paperwork. She turned on the reading light, the one that still worked. She put on her glasses. What she read on the billing statement made her forget her physical pain for a moment. It was a different kind of pain. The financial kind. The document didn't say admitted, it said observation status. Eleanor felt a cold pit in her stomach. She knew what this meant. Her friend Martha had warned her about this years ago. In the U.S. healthcare system, being admitted as an inpatient and being kept under observation are two very different worlds, even if you are in the same hospital bed, eating the same terrible food. If you're an inpatient, Medicare Part A covers the hospital stay. You pay a deductible, but the heavy lifting is done by insurance. But if you're under observation, you are technically an outpatient. Medicare Part B covers doctor services, but you are responsible for a much larger portion of the costs, including the exorbitant prices of self-administered drugs in the hospital. But the real killer was the skilled nursing facility rule. To get Medicare to pay for a rehab center or nursing home recovery, you must have a 3-day qualifying inpatient stay. Observation days do not count. Eleanor had been in the hospital for 3 days, but if she was under observation, she had 0 days of credit. If she needed to go to a nursing home now, which she clearly did, she would have to pay 100% out of pocket. That was around $300 to $500 a day. Her savings would be gone in 6 months. Her house, the legacy she wanted to leave David, would be sold to pay the state. This is the Medicaid spend down. You have to become poor to get help. Eleanor stared at the paper. "They tricked me," she whispered. "They kept me just long enough to bill me, but not long enough to help me." The anger gave her a strange surge of energy. Or maybe it was the delirium setting in. She needed the bathroom. The urge was undeniable now. The bathroom was down the hall. Past the hallway table where the phone sat, she stood up again. The cycle of torture resumed. Step, wince, step, gasp. As she passed the hallway table, she paused. The phone was right there. She could call 911, but if she called 911, they would take her back to the hospital. And then what? She would be stuck in the system again. Or they would force her into a state-run nursing home because she was unsafe at home. She hated her pride. It was a heavy, useless armor. She made it to the bathroom. The toilet looked impossibly low. Standard toilets are 15 inches high. After hip surgery, you need a raised seat. The hospital discharge planner hadn't mentioned that, or maybe she did, and Eleanor wasn't listening. She lowered herself. It was a controlled fall. She landed on the seat with a jolt that sent white-hot sparks through her spine. She sobbed out loud. But the real terror came when she finished. She tried to stand up. She couldn't. Her thigh muscles, atrophied by age and trauma, refused to fire. Her hip locked. She was stuck, trapped on her own toilet in the middle of the night. Time lost its meaning. She sat there for 10 minutes, an hour. Her legs went numb. The cold from the porcelain seeped into her bones. She started to hallucinate. She saw her late husband, Frank, standing in the bathtub. "You always were stubborn, Ellie," he said, shaking his head. "Just call the boy." "I can't," she whispered to the empty room. "He has his own life." "You gave him life," Frank said. "Now let him save yours." It was a hallucination, but it was the clarity she needed. She looked around the bathroom. There, on the edge of the sink vanity, was a hand towel. If she could loop it around the towel rack bar. She grabbed the towel. She threw it over the metal bar screwed into the wall. She gripped both ends. Please don't break, she prayed to the towel rack. Please be screwed into a stud and not just the drywall. She pulled. She screamed. She used every ounce of strength in her arms, bypassing her useless legs. The towel rack groaned. Plaster dust trickled down. With a final guttural heave, she hoisted herself up, locking her knees just as the towel rack ripped halfway out of the wall. She was standing. She didn't wait. She didn't adjust her dress. She grabbed the walker and marched, not to the bed, to the phone. She picked up the receiver. Her fingers dialed the number she knew by heart. "Hello?" David's voice was groggy. It was 3 a.m. "David," Eleanor said. Her voice was cracked and dry. I need help. I'm not fine." There was a silence on the other end. Then the sound of movement, rustling sheets, a lamp clicking on. "Mom, are you hurt?" "I'm at home. I can't walk. I can't get my pills. I'm scared, David." "I'm coming," he said instantly. "I'm leaving now. It's a 6-hour drive. I'll call the neighbor, Mrs. Gable, to go over right now. Do you have a key hidden?" "Under the gnome," Eleanor sobbed. Relief, hot and overwhelming, washed over her. "Hang on, Mom. Just hang on." When Mrs. Gable, the neighbor Eleanor barely spoke to, arrived 10 minutes later in her bathrobe, she found Eleanor slumped in the hallway, clutching the phone. But she wasn't crying anymore. She was sleeping. She had passed out from exhaustion. The next few days were a blur of activity. David arrived. He was angry, not at Eleanor, but at the system. He saw the observation status paperwork. He saw the bruises on her arms. He fought for her. This is where the story turns from a tragedy into a lesson. David didn't just accept the situation. He did 3 things that every senior and their family must know. He appealed the discharge. Even though she was already home, he filed a formal grievance stating the discharge was unsafe. This put a flag on her file. He challenged the observation status. He contacted the hospital's billing department and demanded a review of her status, arguing that the complexity of her surgery and comorbidities required inpatient care. It's a hard battle to win, but you can fight it. And he hired a patient advocate. Since he couldn't stay forever, he hired a professional to navigate the bureaucracy. Eleanor didn't lose her house, but she lost her illusions. She learned that independence doesn't mean doing everything alone. It means building a network that supports you when you fall. 6 months later, Eleanor was walking again. She was in her garden, pruning the roses. The phone rang. It was her friend Martha. "Ellie," Martha said, sounding panicked, "I'm at the hospital. They say I can go home today. It's Friday." Eleanor froze. She looked at the scar on her hip. She tightened her grip on the phone. "Martha," she said, her voice steel, "listen to me very carefully. Do not sign anything. Tell them you do not feel safe. Tell them you need to speak to the patient advocate. And whatever you do—" Eleanor looked at the sun setting, casting those same long shadows. "Do not go home on a Friday."